On today's episode, we're going with the big 5-zippity. 50 episode.
50th, Doc.
We are getting old and we're loving it. 50 episodes. Let's keep it rolling.
Come on in and celebrate with us, because we're 50 episodes.
Boop, boop.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about grief and mourning. Is it argumental or existential? What's it mean to me? Let's talk about death.
Hi, I'm Benny Cabal, and I'm a funeral professional.
And I'm Nicholas Cabal, a psychologist.
Hey, Nick, let's talk about death.
Let's do it.
Hello, everyone. It is the 50th 5-zippity-doo
Hey, Doc.
episode.
Happy 50th episode.
Happy 50th episode, everybody. And I also want to say a special thanks to anybody out there who started with us from episode 1. If you have literally followed us since episode 1, I do want to give you a round of applause.
Yeah, this golf
That
clap.
is amazing.
Golf clap
That
coming
is
in.
amazing. We are very proud. We are very happy, and we are very honored to be able to do this for 50 episodes. Benny, what do you think?
Like, this is incredible. And I want first let's introduce our producer Kelly, who's the third part of this tripod. That it is the silent, always behind the scenes, always helping us make sure that we don't sound silly, or stopping us and saying, "Okay, I have no idea what you just said there. Please clarify." I will say, and I'm sure Kelly will get into this too, we have come a long way since episode 1 on what we have to redo or how we do it. So Kelly, do you want to do a little hi, hey to the listeners?
Hi. Yeah, it's me, Kelly. I am the producer behind the scenes. I feel a part of the Capals a little bit. But yeah, I am, happy to be a part of this very special project, and this very special mission of getting people to talk about death. When I first met the Capal brothers, I was actually going through, some grief in my personal life. And, this has actually helped me, with several of deaths that I've had to face in the last couple of years. So it was kind of a meant to be thing. But yeah, we've had such an amazing time doing, I can't even believe it's 50 episodes, right, guys?
50 episodes. How could could we even thought of we could have enough to talk about death for 50 episodes, and we still have so much more as we
have so much more. We've only scratched the surface of the topics of death. And what's really cool is we get a lot of people emailing us and coming to us to want to be a part of the show. And I think that just goes to say how much that, this is getting out there, and it's resonating with people, especially in the death worker community. So it's really cool to somewhat be a part of this industry, even if I'm, producing from, content wise, but as an outsider looking in, it's pretty fascinating what you guys do. Both of you. You're pretty fascinating, huh?
And for everybody out there that has wrote us and we have not responded or haven't had you on the show, hold on to your seat. We will get to you. We love all these emails and all the thumbs up and stars and beautiful comments that people have left us, and how much this podcast means to them. And the one thing that Benny and I have always really just wanted to do in this podcast, gave us a great way to open that door, was to just get out in public and talk about this. We've been doing this for years. We've been talking, our friends are probably bored and annoyed of us talking about death, but it's amazing to know that we are talking to people in Australia and thank you. Thank you all for giving us a chance listening to this. But more importantly, I want to thank, Kelly for always being there with us, even through thick and thin.
Why,
With
thank you.
You're very welcome. And Benny, because he likes to talk. So that's a good point.
Well, that's good because you need to like to talk to have a podcast, right?
Well, yeah. Well, not only that, but if we're throwing around thank yous, I got to thank Doc Nick for always setting up everything for these because he always has it set up. I just have to show up, which is amazing. So thank you. But I actually kind of want to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about how when we first started, we didn't really think people were going to want to be on the show, and we were struggling to find people. And now it's like the opposite problem. We're struggling to like have enough episodes and time to do this because, as you all know, if you haven't listened, please listen to the earlier, all 49 of them. But one of the big things is we're full-time workers. We're all family people. We all have kids and spouses. So finding time to do this is just
yeah, that's a good shout out. Thank you to my wife, Catherine, for always allowing me to do this and
Thank you,
be a part of
wives.
this.
Thank you, wives.
yes.
And
Well,
my
they're
children
great. They're
who
awesome.
are
Danielle,
who are
Roman,
sleeping above
Veda,
us.
Ian, and the kids on
Yeah.
your end.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
thank you.
Shout out.
Which also a blessing that he's a fireman, so he
He's a
knows
firefighter.
he knows what
We'll
it's
have
like
to get him on the
deal with
show. We
death.
keep saying that of having to get a fireman's
Well, if you're
perspective
listening
one
out
of these
there,
days.
you're next.
One of these days.
You're next, Ian.
Yeah, Ian, you're next. But no, I want to thank you guys because I think what you guys are doing is so amazing and so needed. What's interesting too is we started this right before COVID, I believe. And the timing on that is really interesting because I think so many people were going through, grief and all of that stuff that I think it was even better that people have you guys who I think make the cool thing about you guys and what we've heard from many, many people is you guys make a dark topic like death, entertaining. Like it's funny. Like but you're also very professional and serious about it. But I think the way that you guys add your humor and your funny brotherly twin banter really just is something special. So shout out to you guys. All right.
Well, thank you. And let's talk about the twin thing, right? If we weren't twins, this would never existed, right?
Oh,
because
yeah.
we met at a twin convention in Twinsburg,
Yeah,
Ohio.
Twinsburg. Shout out
to
Twinsburg.
all the twins out there that are
The
listening
Twin
to
Festival.
this.
Yep.
And you were scoping for some good talent, and you luckily came across us. Like,
luckily,
we're honored.
Accidentally fell into the trap.
Yeah. Well, and you can admit to this too. It's interesting because I don't think people realize like this is the normal way we speak. If you would come across Doc or I in real life, like this isn't like scripted conversation. This is exactly what you would have with Doc and I at 7:00 at night if you came in after we cleaned up after visitation. Like these are just the conversations we normally have, which is
I know.
sweet.
It's funny. I remember when we first met at the Twinsburg, I think we had dinner or something in Ann Arbor or whatever, and then you guys invited me to be on your internet show, Kapal's Corner. And I was like, oh gosh, okay. I'm like the behind the scenes type of girl. And then, that was hilarious. And we started talking and afterwards, and Nick was, started talking about existentialism and all of these really interesting intellectual things about, death and everything. And I was like, wait a second, why aren't you guys talking about death? And so it just kind of clicked in my head of like, man, we got to do something with this, a show, a podcast, whatever. And really, I mean, it's very interesting, your dynamic with each other as well. And then you got Kapali to throw in the mix, which he's hilarious. And the fact that he is basically, Benny, is he your apprentice now?
Yeah. So it was very. This is just a family thing, and Doc and Nick and I have talked about, as you know, Kelly, on episodes before. We have a lot of weird family twin type things, and Capaldi was always extremely close to Nick and I growing up, and so I think for him, the biggest problem with Capaldi, and I don't think he would be a man for me saying this with what it came with our job when he was first thinking about it, was he's a very emotional person. So our job itself is very, very demanding when it comes to emotion. So I think he was super worried that he wouldn't be able to do it. He's not.
I'm going to change it to emotionally intelligent.
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
absolutely. I don't mean it as.
That's
I don't
a good
mean it.
one.
I don't mean it as a negative thing. I think
No,
he
I just
took
think when
it as
people hear the word someone is emotional or like very emotional, they take it as
True.
a negative thing. Like,
Oh, I see what you-
we
yeah.
got a crybaby over here in the corner.
Good old
No, but there is people
The
that
Johnny
are,
Depp over there?
are a lot more in tune with their emotions and are allow themselves to display them. And that doesn't mean Chris is a cry. I just for the listeners out there, Chris is not a crybaby. Chris is someone who is legitimately going to hold your hand and cry with you.
Oh, he's an extreme empath, and so when it comes to our profession, that is can become extremely exhausting, mentally and physically. But anyways, I digress. It took.
Well, and dealing with Ben on a day to day basis is
I mean, it's
emotionally
just-
and
I was waiting for that
Yeah,
one, Nick.
It's just
exhausting,
a
too.
golden day, really. But no, he decided to come back after some years of being out there as in sales, and he's helping me out because there's a lot I can learn from. I am not a salesman. I never will be. It's just not what I do. I like the part of my job, which is this conversation right now. This to me is more important than trying to try to make you buy something that you don't want. And I'm not saying salesmen are all like that. I'm just saying, to me, like I can't get it. My brain just cannot process it. So I'm glad to have him because he knows what is expected of a Kapal, and he brings that sales portion. Not only that, but he just brings the older brother around. So it's interesting because I am technically his boss, but he's still my older brother. So it's a weird. It's a weird.
That's
dynamic.
a really interesting
It's a
dynamic.
weird
I'd love
dynamic.
to see that.
Well, and I also think, like I don't know when, I know that in a future episode we're going to be talking about family dynamics, but it's an interesting thing because if you, as an outsider, I'm technically not a funeral professional. I exist within the building because I'm a psychologist who deals with death. So I work alongside of them. That's the best way I would put it. But it's interesting if you were to ever come in and sit with my dad, who is Ben's boss, Benny, who is technically Chris's boss, and Chris. They never come. It never.
Who's technically Doc Nick's boss.
Yeah, right. Doc Nick is above everybody. But like the thing is like if you were to ever sit in a room with all of us, like it's not that you wouldn't know who's in charge, who's on top, or whatever. We're all talking as if we're shooting the crap, right? We're playing poker together, right? But it is an interesting dynamic because there is a chain of command. Obviously, there's reasons for it, but I think what's beautiful about the fact that Benny, Chrissy, and I, Capaldi, he likes to go by Capaldi, and I have a really hard time calling Benny, but I digress. I guess they have a hard time calling me Doc, so we'll go that. So, but like the thing is like we have always been so close, and there was a time where people actually would call us triplets because Chris was a lot shorter than Ben and I. So, like as we grew up, we all looked the same level. Now with Chris, and he's starting to wear, what do you call it, a hair system. Now that he's wearing a hair system, he literally you're like, oh God, you brothers again, right? And like the thing is like he is the perfect blend of Ben and I. That would be the best way I would
Yes,
describe it.
he is. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. I mean, he started it, and then we had the better, we learned what not to do. But no, honestly, no, it's really, this is just an incredible, but I gotta say, Doc, coming from you saying that, I disagree with what you said. I think you being around us, you are as much part of the funeral home as we are a part of the psychology that you're bringing in, because realize our conversations that we're having is making me a better funeral director, and it's also making you a better psychologist that specializes in grief and loss, because you're learning what actually is going on in the field. You're not just getting it from books. And I'm getting it from actually what's going on in the field, and not from what I'm supposed to be, what I was taught in the 8-10 courses of psychology that I had. Because that's the idea. Like, I've learned the biggest thing that I've learned from you within the last 5 years is flip the lens. I try to do that all the time, is like flip the lens as much as possible. And I really think, especially when it comes to grieving families, it helps me, because when it comes to rational thinking, there isn't really rational thinking sometimes for the grievers. So I'm putting all this, and just like everything else, Doc, I think we overthink how people think of us. And that's why I'm proud of this show. I'm proud that we were able to do it, because I think 10 years ago, it would be a professional no-no. You can't talk about what we do in the funeral home. You can't talk about people grieving. You can't talk about this, because that's something they have to talk about on their own. But then what we're realizing now in today, nobody's talking about it. They aren't talking to their kids about it anymore, or they don't know how to talk to their kids about it. And that's okay.
But I also want to take a pause here, because I definitely 100% want to throw a bone to all the older generation funeral directors, because they were put in a really tough spot in their generation. It was, you don't talk about things that could upset people, right? It was a respect thing. It wasn't like, oh, we're hiding the truth behind all these people.
They're pirates now.
No. Funeral directors
Funeral
are
directors
obviously
are pirates.
Right? What I'm saying is that, it makes sense why funeral professionals were very leery about talking about their profession, because the minute that you talk about this profession, you're going to turn off people. Most people.
You're going to upset people too.
Right.
It's upsetting to others.
Right. And the thing is what I have come to find out, talking to actual people once they're, been enlightened with death, or, are dealing with their own death. What I have found out is that they want to know. They want to know how to get better. They want to know how to talk to someone who just lost a loved one. We talk about COVID, right? I can't tell you how many recent widows and widowers I have in my room that are dealing with their spouse dying of COVID. Now what do I do? And a lot of them are young, and they have their whole lives ahead of them. And I just desperately, I'm just so glad we have the opportunity to speak to maybe some that didn't get the opportunity of someone around them to be like, hey, listen, like, we can talk about this. Like, it's okay.
Well, not only that, but we have the platform, right? They didn't have the platform to do this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? It wasn't as convenient. So now is the time. And let's be honest, Doc, if somebody wants to find out something, they're going to find out about it. So they might as well get it from actual professionals that care, that we are caring. And I think that is important. And I'm not trying to toot our own horn, but I think the important message is, like, we care that this gets out there. Like, that's the main thing. And I Kelley, I bet you can agree to that too. Is just, we're very passionate about helping people get through this crazy journey of grief.
I think when you said that some people just don't know how to talk about death, this podcast, it walks you through that. And you guys, you can definitely tell by listening that you're very professional, that you know your shit, and that you care. And I think it humanizes people like yourselves, especially Benny, who's a funeral director, who we have had episodes where we talked about, Hollywood's version of the funeral director, and, their, dark circles under their eyes and scary. And it's like, no, that's not it. You're a young, fun, cool, like punk rocker dude that is in this industry, and you really do care. And after, working on this with you guys, it takes a special type of person to be able to do what you guys do. Both the psychology part with grieving, and both with, all that you do with the funeral profession, embalmment, dealing with the families. I never knew anything of that, because there isn't anything out there of people opening up and telling that. And so I think that you guys kind of, are fresh, perspectives, actually educating. At the end of the day, this podcast is not only entertaining, it's educating. So, I mean, I think that's why, we've gone for 50 episodes because there is so much to educate the public about. And, so anyways, that's my perspective on that.
Well, and I think too, we're still learning. I don't think you ever really graduate from grief, right? I think it's an ongoing cycle, and it's finding out, and it's reading, and it's listening to people's stories, and it's for me doing more funerals and more services and celebrations of life, where I'm starting to things just randomly click. You're at the right place at the right time. And honestly, it's I have learned so much that even Doc, we went ahead in conversations, but because we're talking about this, I'm listening and hearing it. And it is it I've learned so much just from being on this. So, and I honestly, I think what's important too is that Doc and I are really trying to also tip our hats to everybody who's out there in the death profession, whether it be a psychologist, or whether it be a funeral director, or whether it be a hospice nurse or palliative doctor or death doula. Everybody who is in this profession, it is demanding.
Or just a caregiver.
Yeah, anybody who is dealing with, and let's be honest, everybody deals with death. So if
that's
you
what I was going to say too, is like, I remember when we first started this, one of the things that that really resonated with me when I was talking to you guys is death is one thing that everybody has to deal with. Everyone. And you're gonna have to deal with it. And so it's something that needs to, like, it's crazy to me that people don't want to talk about it anymore, because like I mean, it's just something that everybody has to deal with. Even with kids. I mean, I'm glad that I love the episode that we did with how to talk to kids about death, because I actually use that with my kids when they're, when I had a grandmother and an aunt and a grandpa that died. I didn't just say, "Oh, they're sleeping in the," like that stuff. I probably don't know what I would have said, to be honest with you. But that stuff is very valuable.
I think that's a valid point too. And I also want to say to anybody who listens to this and they're like, "Oh, I did the wrong thing," or whatever, like, it's okay. It's okay. This is why this show exists. And if you have a question that you're not sure of, send it our way. I've always been a firm believer two heads are better than one. Like, give it to two guys that are really trying to help people, and see what we can come up with. And I can guarantee you, if we don't know the answer, we'll figure it out. We'll work through it. We'll talk about it. We'll discuss it.
Yeah. And I will say, before this podcast, I was that type of person that was very afraid of death. I did not have a lot of people in my family that died. Everyone in my family seems to live until they're in their 90s, which I hopefully can.
It's a blessing. It's a
But
blessing. It's a blessing that they live that old. You know what I mean? Like it's a blessing that you've had your family members live that long. But it also is a curse because it has not prepared you for the inevitable.
Or when you're dealing with a traumatic loss, because then you're like, whoa, what is this?
for sure, I didn't have a lot of experience with death growing up.
Yeah, like Kelley, like honestly, like do you find that your understanding of grief and loss has expanded from this podcast?
For sure. For sure. I mean, because I wasn't exposed to death really as and like Nick said, it is kind of a blessing and a curse, because when people die in my life, I take it very hard, because and not that not a lot of people, people don't, but like I take it very, very hard. So, if anything, I see this podcast as a blessing, because I've had 3 people in the last year or 2 years, that I'm very close with that have died. And I'm not afraid to talk about it. And I know how to deal with the children, my kids, about it. I have advice for other people about it, because I've learned so much from you guys. So, yeah, this was one of those like meant to be projects for me, that's for sure. And I keep learning each episode. I'm like, oh wow.
I will say it's interesting when I'm out in the community and somebody mentions it. You know, that's like the fourth wall. You know, like we do this, and like there's part of me that's like, oh, okay, this is going out to everybody. But like when somebody actually stops me and goes, I really liked your episode about this, or I listened to your episode on this, it kind of like it kind of like awestrucks me. Like, oh my gosh, like there's people that are actually listening to this. Like I know it's happening, but it's one of those things where it's like it is, and it's and this platform is so nice because even if you are uncomfortable about it, you can listen to it. And nobody needs to know that you're listening to that, right? And I know that's sad that we have to talk about, but that's the realism of this. Like people are very uncomfortable talking about this. So maybe this podcast gives them that extra oomph to get out there and talk. So like 50 episodes, like we've covered a lot, and I every time we have like our little group messages, and we're like, oh, I don't know how we're gonna come up with any more like topics, and it's like we need 2 topics, and like within 5 minutes we have 2 topics. You know what I mean? Like
We
what's like
always
how
do.
did that like?
Always do.
And it's
With that being
blessings.
said, should we do a Q&A and ask about what our favorite episodes are?
Sounds good to me. Are we gonna play? Let's play the track.
Q&A, everyone loves that Q&A.
Q&A, baby.
Yep, baby. Kelley, we always talk with that, so let's start with you first. Your favorite episode, or maybe just fond memory of like the 50 episodes. Like what were you at on that?
One of my favorite episodes is anticipatory grief. I never knew that existed, ever. And it blew my mind. So I will have to say the anticipatory grief was probably one of my favorites, although there's so many. And then I did like the death checklist one too, where it kind of gives you that information of stuff that you need to prepare for. Although I haven't yet, but it's still on my list to get all of that stuff, the will, all of that stuff. That's on my list of things to do.
You're thinking about it. That's track one. Track one. You're doing great.
Exactly. So, what about you guys? Benny, which one did you like the most?
I have to always go back to this one, and I think I've even mentioned that it is my favorite one. I always like the how to talk to children with grief, because I think, to be honest with you,
Mhm.
if an episode is important to me, that's the one. Because if we can teach the next generation better than ourselves on how to grieve, and that it's okay to cry, it's okay to have emotions, it's okay to be mad, it's okay to be angry. Um, that's going to start a generational thing. And if we could start actually educating our youth, and then they can even educate even more, that was the joke, right? Like, someday people are talking about living because everybody's talking about death instead. Like, that would be a great world to me, is like that we have a healthier conversation about death. So for me, definitely how to talk to children about grieving is my favorite episode. Um, but gosh, you're right. There's been so many good ones. I like the death playlist one a lot on music. I always think of my life is based around music. So like I always think about that whenever I'm doing a funeral, is like, why would they play this? Like, and I think the 3 songs or 5 songs or 10 songs that people pick, it says a lot about them. And I think it's so interesting because I don't think people really think about it, but like, if you for me, that I mean, this is what I do day in and day out, and you actually like sit down with like the 3 songs they picked, it tells a lot about the person. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes indifferent. um so yeah, I would say those two, but the definitely how to teach children to me is the most important, so therefore it's my favorite, I think. Doc, your thoughts, favorite episode?
I'm gonna go with the most powerful episode. I think, don't quote me on this. I think it was the mass shooting one when we were talking about that. Um, that was a really hard episode to talk about, even for me as a um, death professional. Like, there's just so many topics that I think we're just scratching the surface on that we need to go dive deeper in. And I guess for all the listeners out there, I just want to say that some of these topics are very difficult for even Benny and I to talk about. And I think that's the most meaningful one so far, because I just remember at the end of it looking at Benny going, I'm glad glad that one's over with. Um, because again, there is just certain things in our field that even the most experienced professional, um, we still struggle with. We still have a hard time. Just because we're around it every day doesn't make us immune to it, I guess would be how I would put it. I think that was the most meaningful one for me.
That was a tough one, man. I think you
That
can
was
tell.
a good one.
I think, if anything, if you want to listen to it, listeners, feel free. And if it's a triggering topic, feel free to pass it on too. But to be honest, I think that's the first one we are at loss of words for a lot of the conversations, or there's long
Yeah, you at
pauses.
that I remember at the end, you guys were just like,
It was just
you know,
drained.
It's so important to talk about it, though. It's
Yeah.
so important to talk about it. But even like really tough conversations, like mass shootings or suicidality or um, child death, like those are the probably the most important ones for us to talk about. But it takes a toll on us.
Well, I think that says a lot about what we're talking about, that even you and I struggle with some conversations, Doc. And I think that's important for people to know too, is that we definitely are not perfect. And there are still topics that even Doc and I are very uncomfortable talking about, because even for us, especially as we become parents and we're starting to talk about mass shootings and knowing that our kids are going to schools, it's very, very challenging. So no, I agree with that. And all 3 of those episodes that we brought up are amazing. You know what? If you haven't listened to us and this is the first episode, listen to those 3 episodes. That'll give you a good basis of what we talk about. I think that's a good circumference of everything that we kind of indulge into.
Yeah, I agree. Those are some good ones.
I definitely think the mass shooting one is our definitely probably most professional one that we've ever done. I mean, we were always professional, but I mean, obviously, but I mean, I think that one, but I think the other two had a lot more humor in it, which I think we're that's our special recipe sauce, right? I think. And
I think
honestly,
another reason. Well, I think another reason why the mass shooting one was so hard to talk about is that Texas
Yeah, it was
elementary
fresh.
school.
It was
It
fresh.
was right after that. It was super fresh, and that was one of the worst
Well,
ones. I
it's
think.
interesting when you talk to the older generation, they'll always tell you like, I remember where I was when JFK happened and stuff like that. And like, I'll never forget where I was when Columbine happened. I just, I know that wasn't the first school shooting, but that one really was profound in my lifetime. Again, these are really triggering. Even thinking about Columbine, like that's very emotionally triggering for me because I remember being a kid and fearing going back to school. Um, all these conversations, especially around traumatic death, whatever we're going to call it, anticipatory grief, all that stuff, like this is so important to just begin the conversation. We can go deeper and hopefully we will, and hopefully we'll answer all your questions. But if you like, again, we say this on every episode and we truly mean it. If there is a thought or a question or something that you just got to get off your chest, feel free to email us. You don't have to put your name in it. You can make it completely anonymous. Like, take care of yourself out there. Like, listen, but also realize that this is a lot. It's very emotionally draining conversations, and it's okay if you need to take a break or you're getting triggered. It's okay.
absolutely. And like all you listeners out there, like for Kelley, Doc, Nick, and I, it's important to hear what your favorite episodes are, or what maybe episodes that we missed the mark in your opinion, maybe, or maybe you'd like us to go deeper into an episode, maybe. So feel
Or
free
if you
to.
have an episode idea that we haven't covered yet, a topic, feel free. We read our emails.
We sure do. Or if you want to be one of the guests, come on down. Email us at let's talk about death pod at gmail.com. 50 episodes. This is still pretty profound that we're here. I feel like we're going to blink and it's going to be 100, and then we're going to blink and it'll be 5,000. It'll be. We'll get there. We'll get there. So thank you so much.
Maybe our kids will begin to talk about it. They'll be
Honestly,
taking over the podcast.
The biggest celebration is all you listeners out there. So thank you for listening. Keep tuning in. Keep helping us promote this because you're the best way. Word of mouth. Get us out there. Thank you so much. And Kelley, do you want to take this one?
Sure. If you're not talking about death,
You're not living.